Good morning. In my video last week I pointed out that rhubarb was starting to grow and that this was one of the signs of spring. Now I think that doesn't really do it justice, because rhubarb, in my opinion, is a very spectacular plant. It produces long red stems, big glossy leaves, sometimes 2 feet across, maybe more. And it doesn't just start into growth, it erupts into growth. Now it's mid-February and the rhubarb is starting to grow. You'll be able to pick it in a couple of weeks' time. But with a bit of encouragement, it can produce its long red stems earlier. In fact, you can have rhubarb crumble for your Christmas dinner, if you like. And the way that you do that is by forcing it. In other words, making it believe that spring has come early. You cover the plant over with a large bucket or something of that sort, depriving it of light, and you give it a slight shelter from the weather and the environment, and it starts to grow thinking it's spring. And it produces long red stems, which you can then harvest, and apparently they're sweeter and better than the stems that come later. Rhubarb is a native of Siberia, so it's right at home in the cold and wet climate of Yorkshire, where it's commercially grown in an area known as the Rhubarb Triangle. The industry of growing rhubarb commercially in Yorkshire really dates to around the late 19th century, when two things combined to make it possible. First of all, the availability of cheap sugar. I mean, you need something to sweeten rhubarb to make it palatable. And you can sweeten it with things like dried fruit and honey and stuff, but cheap sugar is really the option for most people. And the other thing that was vital to the industry was the development of a railway network, which meant that growers could load up a train with their produce and have it in Covent Garden Market in London by breakfast time. So it was able to trade it nationwide. In fact, I believe it was traded as far away as Paris. What the commercial growers did to increase their growing season was to force the plants to produce early, and they did that by moving them into heated, dark sheds where the plant was tricked into believing it was spring and would produce masses of these long, narrow stems, which the grower could then harvest and sell at a premium. It wasn't possible to import fresh fruit from warmer parts of the world because transport really just wasn't quick enough, and only the very richest people could afford the kind of heated greenhouses and walled gardens you need to produce fresh fruit out of season. It's said that in the forcing sheds you could actually hear the thousands of rhubarb plants growing, the popping of the buds and the gentle rustle and squeak of the leaves as they unfolded. In these modern times, you can go to the supermarket and buy pretty much anything you want, anytime you want. Fresh fruit, no problem. They just fly it in from somewhere else, like Kenya or New Zealand. And so things like rhubarb are a little bit passé, a bit out of fashion, but it's still one of my favourite plants. Perhaps it's just my nostalgia for a time gone by, but I think rhubarb is a wonderful plant, and I think it deserves a place in any British garden. After all, it likes our climate, and there's not many things you could say that about. Well, that's all I'm going to say on the subject, so until I see you again, cheerio.